Welcome to another video lecture by Utkal Digital Classes. I am your tutor Raghav Chaturvedi, and today we are going to look at wave motion and electromagnetic waves. I have divided this lesson into two parts. So this video will be your part 1, which will include topics such as classification of waves, longitudinal waves, transverse waves, stationary waves, and also about the superposition of waves. We start our lecture by talking about waves and wave motion. So I begin with talking to you about the definition of a wave. A wave is a disturbance that propagates in space and it transports energy and momentum from one point to another without the transport of matter. Given this definition, I can have several examples of waves. An analogous example is, let's say you are at your home and you have two options. Either you can write a letter or you can use a telephone. In the first method, what will happen? This particle itself will move through space and it will carry some energy with it. Okay. And in the second way, there is no bulk motion of any material. So this is your wave concept. So in wave concept, there will be no bulk motion of material uh, with the transport of energy. And in writing a letter or in similar processes, you will have bulk motion when that energy is transferred. Another example of the first part is if you have a ball and you throw a ball to some other place, let's say here. So it had a kinetic energy here, and wherever the ball goes, it carries the kinetic energy with it. This is the entire concept, and your waves differ from it. So we talked about disturbances when we were looking at simple harmonic motion. So if you had a small disturbance at a point, let's say here, so this led to these oscillations were in SHM given by some curves like these. You can also have oscillations like these, you can have oscillations like these, or you can have oscillations in any way. Now what happens is, these oscillations were telling you about how this particle or this site of disturbance is behaving. Okay. Now what happens in a wave is this disturbance moves forward in space in a given time. So this moving forward of your disturbance or the motion of the disturbance through space will be known as your wave motion. So if my particle was oscillating like this, okay, so how do these oscillations move through space is what we will be concerned about. So this will become more clear as we go along. So first of all, I'll try to classify waves. There are different ways you can classify them. The first one is by the necessity of medium. Second is by propagation of energy. Third is by dimension, and fourth is by vibration of particle. So what about the first one? Based on necessity of medium. So a wave may or may not require a medium for its propagation. The waves which do require a medium are called non-mechanical. Sorry, the waves that do not require any medium are called non-mechanical waves. Examples will be light or heat or radio waves. And on the other hand, waves which do require a medium, they are known as mechanical waves. So sound will be an example of mechanical wave. So in the next one is based on propagation of energy. So here I can divide it into two parts, progressive and stationary. So the progressive wave propagates with constant velocity in a medium. Okay. So the progressive wave, I will have constant velocity. Note this will be important because we'll be studying about stationary waves. In stationary waves, particles of the medium vibrate with different amplitudes, but the energy does not propagate. Here the particles vibrate, but energy does not propagate. This should be clear as we will be talking about stationary waves again in the future. Next is based on the direction of propagation. You can have one-dimensional waves, two-dimensional waves, or three-dimensional waves. So The examples of one-dimensional waves will be your waves moving on a string. Your two-dimensional waves will include something such as surface waves, or ripples on water. Okay, and you might think ripple, if this is your water surface and if you drop a stone in it, you might think the ripple is one dimension. The ripple is one dimensional because your oscillations are only up and down. But as you can see, this wave is propagating in a two-dimensional plane, even though the oscillations are only in the up and down direction of every particle. This wave is moving in the two dimensions. Similarly, you can have 3D waves. The examples of 3D waves are plenty: sound wave, light wave. Similarly, you can have classification based on the vibration of particle. You can have a transverse wave, or you can have longitudinal wave. In transverse wave, what happens is uh, the direction associated with the disturbance. Disturbance is basically the motion of the particles of the medium, is at right angles to the direction of propagation of wave. So if my wave is propagating like this, then my disturbance is propagating in a perpendicular direction. However, in the longitudinal case, what we have is, if the wave is propagating like this, so your disturbances are also in this direction, either this or this. So for the example for longitudinal is your sound waves. The example for your transverse case is your EM waves. We'll talk about EM waves in the future. These are electromagnetic waves. Mechanical transverse waves are also known as S waves or shearing waves. This can come in the examination. These are only generated in solids or surface of liquids. Okay, what happens in this in here, each individual particle of the medium executes simple harmonic motion about their mean position, which I have seen as this is a particle. It's undergoing a simple harmonic motion about its mean position. I'll talk to you about certain terms: crest and trough. So the crest is a portion of the medium which is raised temporarily above the normal position of the rest of the particles of the medium. And what is a trough? A trough is a portion of the medium which is depressed temporarily when a wave is passing, or the transverse wave is passing through the medium. This should be clear from here. Your wave is passing in this direction. Okay. Similarly, you have longitudinal wave motion. What happens here? Here the oscillatory motion of the medium particles produces regions of compression or high pressure. So uh, these are regions of high pressure. Then there are regions of rarefaction which are low pressure regions. Okay, and these propagate in space and time. So there are regions of rarefactions and compressions. R is rarefaction, C is compression, and these go along. As you can say, this is compression, this is rarefaction, then compression again, then rarefaction. Note that in the previous one, your lambda was your wavelength, so it was the distance between two crests or two troughs. Okay, what was your time? How do you define the time period? So if this particle or this vibration or this low position is given by this, so at this point it has a tendency to go like this. Okay, go in the upward direction. Now when will this repeat? This exact same position will repeat at this point. At this point it will be going like there. Similarly, if I want to calculate it from this direction, okay, this same thing will repeat after this much length. So the length between these two, first of all, will be your lambda. Similarly, at the crest here also you have tendency like this, tendency like this. So you have the lambda between the same positions. And similarly, the time it takes between these two will also be known as your time period. Okay. Yeah, I've already talked to you about longitudinal waves. You should also note here that the regions of high particle density are called compressions, and regions of low particle density are known as rarefactions. Here also lambda can be easily calculated between two compressions, center of the two compressions, which gives you the value of your lambda. Now we can talk about certain other things such as mechanical waves in different media. So in order to do this, we'll take a look at this diagram and first of all talk to you about some of the terms that are connected with wave motion. First is your lambda. Lambda is your wavelength as I defined. Okay. Greek letter lambda. So it is the distance traveled by the wave during the time any one particle of the medium completes one vibration about its mean position. Okay, you can also define the wavelength as the distance between any two nearest particles of the medium vibrating in the same phase. So, as I said just now, these two particles are vibrating in these two are same phase vibrations. Okay, so distance between these two will be your lambda. Similarly, you can find distance between these two, it will be lambda. Similarly, you can find distance between any of these two, it will all be equal to your wavelength lambda. Now you have the frequency. We'll quickly go over these terms because sometimes they're confusing. So how do you find the frequency or what is frequency? So frequency is the number of vibrations or number of complete wavelengths completed by a particle in 1 second. Okay. What is the time period? My time period denoted by t is the time taken by the wave to travel a distance equal to one wavelength. Okay. So the time, so if this is my one wavelength, let's say from this point to this point, this is my one wavelength. So the time taken by the wave to travel this much distance is your time period. Next is what is the amplitude of the wave. So it is the maximum displacement of the vibrating particle from its equilibrium position. What is the angular frequency? It will be denoted by omega. It is defined as 2 pi by t. Next, what is the phase? Now a phase is a quantity which contains all information related to any vibrating particles in a wave. Okay, so for any equation that will be given to you in, let's say, in the form y is equal to a sine kx minus omega t or a sine omega t minus kx, in both the cases you have whatever is inside the bracket is your phase. Okay, do take this down because you will be given waves of this form. Then you should know about what is the wave number or also known as the angular wave number. Okay, it is divided by k is equal to 2 pi by your wavelength lambda. Next, what do you have? You have your wave number. Wave number is 1 by lambda. Okay, so your wave number can also be written as k by 2 pi. This is actually, what does this physically mean? It is the number of waves in a unit length of the wave pattern. Next, we talk about some other factors such as particle velocity, wave velocity, and particle acceleration. So we'll look at be using this diagram to explain it properly. So let me mark it as this was 8. So let me mark these things as let's say 9. So first I'll talk to you about particle velocity. Note that the particle velocity and the wave velocity are not the same things. Okay, so the individual particles which make up the medium do not travel through the medium with the waves. They simply oscillate about their equilibrium positions. The instantaneous velocity of any oscillating particle of the medium through which the wave is traveling is known as the particle velocity. Okay, so in order to find the particle velocity, if your oscillation is given by y and by x, note that whenever wave is given to you, a wave motion will be in terms of time, or its propagation will be in terms of time. You have been given here with oscillations. Y is your oscillation and x is how the wave is propagating. To get more perspective on this, as I said, generally when you are having a particle at a stationary point, you had something like y is equal to a, let's say cos omega t. Okay, so y, or your amplitude of oscillation, let's say it goes up, it goes down, it had a maximum amplitude equal to a. Okay, and yeah, and it was maybe sinusoidal or non-sinusoidal. It can be of different varieties. Now you have this particle here, so that is given by your y in this diagram. You will be given these diagrams in the paper, and now these particles will not move. What these particles will do is they will give their energies to the next particles. Okay, and the energy will propagate through space. So it's basically you're taking this packet of energy, whatever this amplitude is giving, and then you're seeing how this transports through space. Okay, so this transportation is the reason why I've mentioned x in the x-axis here. Okay, and you can note that there was no mention of any x here because there was no propagation involved. Now when you're talking about waves, you're talking about propagation of this vibration or with this disturbance through some space. Okay, so let's say this was your y direction in which the oscillations were happening. Now you're seeing how this oscillation is moving along in space. Okay, this is the entire picture that I wanted to paint. So if you want to find the particle velocity, you have to find uh, dy by dt. So I'll just mention these as formulas slightly later. Before that, let's talk about what a wave velocity is. So the velocity which with the disturbance or the planes of equal wave phase, which is the wave front, is traveling through the medium, will be known as your wave velocity. We'll just quickly write the relations between these so that you can easily understand them in the paper. So let your wave equation be given be something like 1a sine omega t minus kx. Okay, then your particle velocity, let's say vp, or let's say, let me call this particle velocity. The particle velocity is nothing but dy by dt, where y was your y-axis or the amplitude of oscillations. Okay, this will thus be given by how much? This is nothing but a omega cos of omega t minus kx. Now how is the wave velocity defined? Your wave velocity is equal to, will be given by vp in the papers. It is nothing but the lambda divided by the time period. Okay, which will be nothing but omega by k, because k is equal to 2 pi by lambda. So this is your wave velocity, this is your particle velocity. These two are different things. Okay, so some other things that I want to talk to you about is what is dy by dk or dy by dx, sorry. If you're given a graph like this for a wave or any other graph, then all these you can, at all these points you can find the slopes. So delta y, dy by dx is equal to the slope of these curves. So if I find them out, I see that dy by dx is nothing but minus a into k cos omega t minus kx is equal to minus a by omega into omega k cos omega t minus kx. Okay, this can be written as nothing but minus 1 by vp into del y by del t. Okay, this gives us the equation which will be useful for the waves. So dy by dx, where y is your, y is what? Y is your the oscillations of the particles. Okay, and x is your how x is the distance the wave propagates in the x direction. So dy by dx is nothing but minus 1 by velocity of your wave, which will be easily given by omega and k, okay, into dy by dt. This is your differential equation for a wave motion. I sincerely want you guys to note this thing down. This will be very useful. from the paper's perspective. Okay, uh, you can also find one more equation, which is the differential equation of harmonic progressive waves. I can write that down also. That says d square y by dx square is equal to 1 by vp square into del square y by del t square. Okay, you should note this down also. These two are important, and we'll probably be seeing how we'll be using them in the papers. Okay, you can also find the acceleration of the particles. Now, the acceleration of the particle is the second partial derivative of your y with respect to t. So I can write my acceleration of the particle nothing but del square y by dt square. Note that now my y is depending on both x and t. Earlier in SHM, my y was only depending on time. Now my amplitude or my oscillations are depending on both the where they are in space and what is the time that has passed. Okay, this is nothing but omega square y. Okay, this is similar to what we had in my SHM case. Now, there are some relations between phase difference, time difference, and part difference. We'll not go into much of the details there. So, the only thing that tell you about is the end relation, which is, let's say your phase difference is delta phi. Phase will generally be denoted by phi. So, delta phi divided by 2 pi is equal to delta lambda divided by lambda is equal to delta t divided by t. Okay, it says the thing that you should take a note from here, which will be used in wave optics a lot. Your path difference is equal to lambda by 2 pi times your phase difference. Okay, this will be useful. We'll explain this when you go on to study about wave optics. This will become much more clear. So as I told you uh, about these two equations, equation number 1 and 2. So even if you want to find the general equation of wave motion, you'll see that it turns out that it takes a form which is this. So this can also be written as your general equation of wave motion, or the differential equation that the wave will always satisfy. Okay, and whenever this is the differential equation, your wave is generally of the form y is equal to is a function of x and t, and it often turns out to be a function of the form ax plus minus bt. Okay, as we saw that it was sine of kx minus omega t. Okay, similarly for a general wave that has a solution like this, for a solution like 2, you have that your equation will be some of the form of a function of ax plus minus bt. Okay, thus any function of x and t. So note that any function of x and t which satisfies this equation, equation number 2. Okay, or which can be written as this equation. Okay, as this equation will be represented by a wave. Further, if these conditions are valid, you can easily see that I can easily find my velocity of my wave. Okay, it is equal to the coefficient of t divided by my coefficient of x. Sorry, coefficient of x is equal to b by a. This is also very important. Sometimes they just ask you what is the wave velocity. So if you consider the case, let's say I wrote about y is equal to a sine kx minus omega t. This was my trial function for the wave. So here what do you see? What is the coefficient of x? It is k. What is the coefficient of t? It is omega. Okay, so your vp or wave velocity is equal to omega upon k. This is what you already wanted, because omega is 2 pi into mu, and k is 2 pi by lambda. Okay, and lambda mu is equal to the velocity. So this works out in our favor. But given any function, it need not be a function of this form. But whenever you're given a function and you're given values, you're given some values here. Let's say you're given 3x minus 5t or something. Then using these values, you can easily see what is the velocity of the wave by using the formula that I just told you about. Next, let's take a look at the intensity of a wave. So the amount of energy flowing per unit area and per unit time is known as the intensity of the wave. It will be represented by I, and it is given by the formula I is equal to 2 pi square f square into a square rho into v. Now what do these things mean? First of all, note this formula. It's really important. Uh, F is your frequency, A is your amplitude of oscillations, rho is the density, and V is your wave velocity. Okay. So here your length is equal to Vt. You should note that your intensity is proportional to the square of the amplitude of oscillation. You can also define the power in a similar way. So if P is the power of an isotropic point source, then you can write that intensity is equal to power by 4 pi into r square, or I is inversely proportional to r square. For a line source, what do you have? For a line source, uh, if P is the power of the line source, then the intensity at a distance r is given by P by 2 pi r into L. Okay. Or intensity is proportional to 1 by r. We again look at another question. A traveling harmonic wave is represented by the equation. Let me just write this equation. These are the standard questions that generally come. So you have minus 3 sine of 50t plus 2x. Okay, where x and y are in meter and t is in seconds. Which of the following is correct statement about the wave? They are talking about the propagation direction and the speed of the wave. So if you just compare this equation with the standard equation of wave motion, okay, which is, what is the standard equation? It is y is equal to a sine omega t minus kx. From here you can easily see that the wave is moving along the negative x direction, and what is the velocity is equal to omega by k, which turns out to be 50 by 2 is equal to 25 meter per second. So it is moving with the velocity of 25 meter per second in the negative x direction. The pressure wave P is equal to 0.01 sine 1000 t minus 3x corresponds to the sound produced by a vibrating blade on a day when atmospheric temperature is 0 degrees Celsius. On some other day when temperature is T, the speed of the sound produced by the same blade and at the same frequency is found to be 336. Approximate value of the temperature T is given by what? First of all, you are given the equation of the wave. So just write it down and then compare it to the standard equation of your wave. So what is the standard equation? My standard equation is A sine omega t minus kx. Okay. So using this, you can easily see if you compare the value of P given here. So you have your omega is equal to 1000 radians per second, and you have your K is equal to 3 per meter. This is the radians per second. With this clear, you can easily find the velocity of the wave. So velocity, let's say at 0 degrees Celsius is omega by k is equal to 333.3 meter per second. Now we need to see what is the dependence of velocity on temperature. We already talked about this before. So velocity of sound by v2 is equal to root t1 by t2, because it is proportional to temperature. So what is my temperature? Note that temperature will always be taken in Kelvin. Plus 0 degrees Celsius to 73 plus, let's say, 70 degrees. Okay. Now if I just compare this to 333.3 divided by 336, I will find that my value of temperature is equal to 4 degrees Celsius. Next, we talk about the superposition principle. So two or more waves can propagate in the same medium without affecting the motion of the other one. If several waves propagate in the same medium simultaneously, then the resultant displacement of any particle will be, or any particle at any instant, will be equal to the vector sum of the displacements produced by individual waves. So if there are multiple, let's say there are multiple waves passing through a region 1, 2 and 3. Okay, so at a position, let's say P, the net amplitude will be equal to the amplitude of oscillation due to 1, due to the second wave and due to the third wave. Okay, so the superposition principle is valid for the amplitude of these waves. Okay, and this phenomena of intermixing of two or more waves to produce a new wave is known as a superposition principle. So when these three waves go and they are at a point P, so at that point P you get a new amplitude. It's not like you get one of these three amplitudes, you get a summation or a new amplitude. Okay, so the resultant displacement of a particle at any point of the medium at any instant of time is the vector sum of the displacement caused to the particle by the individual waves. This will be your definition. Okay, so there will be different kinds of superpositions that we'll be talking about. The first one is interference. Here there is a superposition of two waves having equal frequency and nearly equal amplitude. Okay, so I'll just write this down here in brief. So mu1 is equal to mu2, frequencies are equal and amplitudes are almost similar. Okay, next is your beats. This is the superposition of two waves of nearly equal frequencies in the same direction. So mu1 is close to mu2. Okay, and there is a condition of same direction. You should all note these conditions. These are essential in the paper sometimes. Third is the stationary wave that I talked about before. So these are superpositions of equal waves from opposite directions. So what do you mean by equal waves? Everything will be equal. A1 will be equal to A2. mu1 will be equal to mu2. Okay, and your directions will be opposite. So opposite direction. Interference happens when there are two waves of nearly equal amplitudes and equal frequencies traveling in the same direction and having the same state of polarization superposed. And here what happens is the intensity varies from point to point. So intensity will vary depending on which point in space you are looking at. Here what you do is you take one of the waves given like this, having an amplitude A1. Okay, you take another wave having an amplitude A2. Here the frequency is the same for both, omega. The wave number, angular wave number is same, k, and there is an extra phase phi in one of the other waves. Okay, then what you do is due to the superposition principle, you have your amplitude given by a sum of both of them. Okay, and it will turn out to be sum a into sine of omega t minus kx plus sum delta. Okay, what are these values? We'll look at these when we talk about wave optics. So there we do a thorough discussion of this. Just note that your final amplitude square will be equal to the square of amplitudes of the first two plus 2 times a1 into a2 into cos of that extra phase that you had. So this is one thing that you should note from here. So let's begin this question. Two coherent sources produce waves of different intensities which interfere. After interference, the ratio of the maximum intensity to the minimum intensity is 16. So the intensity of the waves are in the ratio of which of these four? So first of all, what is your Imax? My Imax is nothing but A1, or Imax is proportional to A1 plus A2 square. And what is your minimum intensity? It is proportional to A1 minus A2 square. Now I can easily write this down as if I divide these two, I'll separate this line. I get Imax by Imin is equal to A1 plus A2 by M1 minus A2 whole square, where there were two waves that were interfering. The first one had an amplitude as A1, the second one had an amplitude of A2. So this is the condition of maximum intensity and minimum intensity. So you can you can see from here that first of all I1 by I2 is equal to root of I1 by I2 is equal to A1 by A2. Okay, this is already known to you. So these two equations are known to you, that corresponding to A1 you have an intensity I1, corresponding to the second wave you have an intensity I2. They are related by this function, and your Imax by Imin is given by this. Now Imax by Imin is given to be 16, so I can have that Amax by Amin. So my A max amplitude maximum, or the resultant amplitude here, and divided by Amin is equal to 4, because this is given to be equal to 16, where A max is what? A max is equal to A1 plus A2, and A minimum is equal to A1 minus A2. Now if I just use the general form, A1 plus A2 by A1 minus A2 is equal to 4 by 1. Okay, here now we can use the componendo dividendo rule from mathematics, which says that A1 by A2 is equal to 5 by 3. Okay, what is this rule? This rule basically says if A plus B divided by A minus B is equal to, let's say, C by D, then we have that A by B is equal to C plus D divided by C minus D. Okay, so what I have here is 4, what I have here is 1, so I will have this then A by B will be equal to 4 plus 1, which is 5, by 4 minus 1, which is 3. So coming back to our original equation, I have A1 by A2 is equal to 5 by 3. That implies I can write that I1 by I2 from this equation. I1 by I2 is equal to 5 by 3 whole square, or it is equal to 25 by 9. Next we talk about the velocity of a transverse wave. So let rho be the density of matter. So you can write that mass per unit length, which will be denoted by m. Okay, so mass per unit length will be how much? It is pi r square L into density divided by your length L. So this is your length L. Okay, you multiply your net volume, which is your pi r square into L. Okay, pi r square into L, where this is the radius, and next I talk to you about the velocity of a transverse wave. So consider this string right over here. So this string has a net tension T in it, okay, and it has a mass of m, and it has a length of L. Let's say it has a small radius r. So my mass per unit length will be, which will be given by my value of m here, is nothing but your pi r square L into rho. Rho is your density, divided by L, which gives you the value pi r square into rho. Okay, this is your mass per unit length. Now your velocity of the transverse wave in any wire. Okay, so in any wire the velocity is given by root of the tension in the wire divided by the mass per unit length. Okay, so I want you guys to remember this formula. Mass per unit length can be substituted for the value above, which is equal to pi r square rho. Okay, and pi r square is nothing but the area of the wire, so it can be written as root of t by a rho. Okay, this is a very important relation because velocities are generally asked in the paper. You can look for different things from here as well. So if your mass per unit length is constant, then you have something known as the law of tension or the tension law, your velocity is proportional to root of t. Similarly, if your tension is constant, you have your velocity is proportional to your root of 1 by m. Similarly, you can keep other values constant here. For example, if you take this equation, you can take another value to be constant and see how it varies with the third one. Let's solve another question. The equation of traveling wave on a stretched string of linear density 5 gram per meter is y is equal to 0.03 sine 450 t minus 9x. Okay, where distance and time are measured in SI units. The tension in the string is given by what? So in here you will be comparing it with the standard equation first. Let me just write whatever is given. So you have y is equal to 0.03 into sine of 450 t minus 9x. First of all, you know that it is going in the positive x direction because of this form. Now if you compare it with the standard equation of wave, you will see that omega is nothing but 450, okay, and your k is nothing but 9. Now with these two you can find the velocity of the wave, which is nothing but omega by k, which is 450 by 9, or it is 50 meter per second. So the velocity of the wave is 50 meter per second. Now velocity of traveling wave on a stretched string is given by a formula that you already know. So velocity is given by root of t by mu. Mu is the mass per unit length. That implies I can write that t by mu is equal to the square of 50, which is 2500. Okay. Now just substituting the values of linear mass density mu here, I can see that my tension is equal to 2500 into 5 into 10 to the power minus 3, which will give me the value as 12.5 newtons. So a string of length 1 meter and mass 5 gram is fixed at both ends. The tension in the string is given to be 8 newtons. The string is set into vibrations using an external vibrator of frequency 100 Hz. The separation between the successive notes on the string is close to what? So first of all, what is the velocity of a wave on a string? So my velocity is nothing but root of t by mass per unit length. Let me call it mu or m, whatever you want to call it. It's nothing but 8 divided by 5 into 1000. Okay, which comes out to be 4 meter per second, or 40 meter per second. 40 meter per second. Okay. Next, what do I have? I can write my lambda or my wavelength of the wave in terms of v by m, v by frequency, sorry. So this is equal to 40 by what is the frequency given? It is given to be 100 Hz. Okay, so wavelength is this many meters. Now what is the separation between successive nodes? So separation between successive nodes is given by lambda by 2. So separation between successive nodes is equal to lambda by 2. How? As you can easily see, if this is your something, your wave is like this, okay, and it gets reflected back, let's say like this. This is one of the examples. So the nodes are actually at a distance of lambda by 2. Even if you extend this, okay, if you extend it, keep extending it, then again the nodes will be at a distance of lambda by 2 for every case possible. So your distance between successive nodes is lambda by 2 is equal to 40 divided by 2 into 100, which will give me the answer as 20 centimeter. Taking forward the case of the propagation of transverse waves on a wire, let's talk about the first case, which is the reflection from a rigid end. So you have a wire which is connected to, let's say, the wall. Okay, this end is fixed. This is end A, this is end B. Now this end A is in your hand and you are trying to flick the wire, okay, and trying to make waves on the wire. Now let's see what really happens at the other end. So when you create a pulse in the wire, okay, or the string, whatever you're taking, so this pulse will travel along the wire or the string. Now when it reaches the end, what will happen is this last element, let's say this is my last element of the wire, and this is where my uh, wall is, or my clamp is. This will, let's say this is my point, or I'll call this point the clamp. These are actually joined together. I'm just making them distant right now. So when this pulse is coming, the final will happen is, because the pulse is coming like this, okay, what will happen is this last point will be tending to go up, okay. So this last point of the string will try to act a force, let's say F, on this clamp, so that this clamp also moves up, okay. Now because the Newton's third law, my clamp will apply an equal and opposite force on my last point of the string or wire in the downward direction of the same magnitude, okay. Now what actually happens is, because this clamp is fixed, okay, or we have a rigid end because this clamp is not moving, okay, so this part does not go up, okay. However, because my string is still free to move, okay, there is a force acted on the last element of the string in the downward direction. When this happens, okay, this leads to a pulse that starts to propagate in the opposite direction, okay. So if I want to summarize this, what happens is, the force on the left part of the string transmits the forward wave pulse, okay, it transmits the forward wave pulse, and hence the force exerted by the clamp sends a return wave pulse, okay, and thus the reflected wave from the fixed end, and the reflected wave is inverted with respect to the original wave. So if my incoming wave was something like this, okay, upon reflection by a rigid wall, okay, because the wall, that point, last point is not moving, that is why the opposite wave will go back, okay. So what is really happening here, you can see it from the, if I write it in terms, in mathematical terms. So I have my equation of a wave propagating in the x direction, positive x direction. Note, this is wave propagating in the positive x direction, okay, positive x direction. For the positive motion, you have uh, omega t minus kx, okay. For the negative x direction motion, you have omega t plus kx, okay. This should be remembered. This talks to you about in which direction the wave is propagating. So you have the incident wave going in the right direction, okay. After reflection, what will happen is, there is the move wave, first of all, will try to start moving in the opposite direction, and there is a additional phase of pi, because this is similar to your wave, your light waves reflecting from denser mediums. This will be the same analogy there, but here there is a net phase of pi that is added, okay. Now if you add that phase of pi there, you will get a negative value outside. So my returning amplitude, or the amplitude of the reflected wave, this is incident, this is reflected. So the amplitude is negative first of all, so that you can easily see that my pulse is having displacements in the negative y direction, and you can easily see that the amplitude is actually the same. So the amplitude is the same, it's now moving in the negative direction with a negative direction of the oscillations. Now allow me to compare this situation to the reflection from a free end. So the right end of the string is now attached to a light frictionless ring which can freely move on the vertical rod. So this is the ring that I made for you. Now a wave pulse is sent on the string from the left. My incident wave is a sine omega t minus kx. Okay, this wave is going like this, or the pulse is going like this. Now when this wave will reach the right end, okay, the element at this end is acted on by the force from the left to go up. So this pulse wants this last end to go up, the last end of the string to go up, okay. However, there is no corresponding restoring force on the right, as the rod does not exert a vertical force on the ring. Result, what will happen is, the right end is displaced upwards, so this end will get displaced upwards, okay, more than the height of the pulse. That it will overshoot the normal maximum displacement. This last point will overshoot its amplitude. Okay, or the maximum displacement that is there. Now the lack of restoring force from the right can be equivalently described in the following way. So I'll try to describe it in another way. So an extra force acts from the right, which sends a wave from the right to the left with its shape identical to the original one. Okay. So uh, a reflected wave will travel in the opposite direction, but here the amplitude will be in the same direction. So the amplitude will not change its direction. Okay. Here the wave is reflected by the free end without any inversion. So this is all you need to know. So because if this overshoot, actually what actually happens is, if this is my, let's say this is my free end, okay, and this was my original amplitude of the wave pulse. Now when this comes in something like this, okay, now it wants my last element to go up. Okay, this will go up, but it will go beyond this point. Okay, and after it goes beyond this point, it starts to come down, and when it comes down, it leads to a pulse in the same direction again. Okay, it sends it in the negative direction, but the amplitude does not change because there is no restoring force acting on it. With these things in mind, we can talk about stationary waves. So the waves propagating in such mediums will be reflected at the boundary and produce a wave of the same kind traveling in the opposite direction. So whether it is a rigid end or a free end, you see that you have reflected waves of the same kind, okay, traveling in the opposite direction. So when these two waves superimpose, the incident and the reflected waves, you get something known as the stationary waves. For stationary waves to happen, you should have the same frequency, they should have the same amplitudes, and they should be opposite in direction. So let's consider the two cases quickly. The first case is when the reflection is from the rigid end. So we just now saw that when your incident wave is like this and there is a rigid end involved, so your reflected wave will be something like this. Okay. So my incident one is given by a sine omega t minus kx. I used omega t minus kx, that implies it's going in the positive x direction. Okay. After reflection, there is an extra phase of pi that I told you about. So that gives me my returning wave or reflected wave to be y2. Now if I do the superposition of y1 plus or superposition of both, okay, it gives me a sine omega t minus kx minus a sine omega t plus kx, which gives me my net y is equal to minus 2a sine kx cos omega t. So you should first of all note this, and you can easily find this out in the paper as well. You should know the trigonometric identities for the subtraction of two sines. Okay. Now you can easily see from here what is the amplitude of this wave. So my amplitude is nothing but 2a sine kx. What is the velocity of the particles? Velocity of particles is given by dy by dt. Okay. So your velocity is 2a omega sine kx into sine omega t. Basically derivative of this. You can find the strain as well. Sometimes they ask for strain. So your strain is nothing but dy by dx. Okay. So that you can find out. You can find out the elasticity. Elasticity is stress by strain. Okay. So it will be given by dp by dy by dx. Similarly, there is a change in pressure which will be equal to E into dy by dx. Okay, E is the energy, and you have your nodes given as x is equal to, at x is equal to 0, lambda is equal to lambda by 2 lambda, and antinodes at x is equal to lambda by 4, 3 lambda by 4, etc. You don't need to remember these things. If you can easily just find out, if you can just superimpose these two and find this out, then you will probably be able to do everything else. Nodes means values at which y will go to 0. So node is a point at which y goes to 0. Antinode is a point when y takes the maximum value. Similarly, we can look at what happens when there is a reflection from the free end. So we saw that in the case of reflection from a free end, what happens was, this was your incident wave, and upon reflection, what did I find? My ray went in the similar fashion in the opposite direction. Okay, so this is my incoming wave, this is my outgoing wave. You add these two and you get your superimposed wave. From here you can easily see what is the amplitude. It is 2a into cos kx. You can find the velocity of the particle as well. Similarly, you can find all the other things that we talked about. Next, let's talk about transmission of waves. So sometimes we may have a situation in which the boundary is intermediate between the two cases that we studied right now, which was the rigid case and the non-free case. So when this is the case, part of the incident energy will be transmitted and part will be reflected. So for example, I've given you several examples here. Uh, Suppose a light string is attached to a heavier string. I'm attaching a light string to a heavier string. Okay, when a pulse is traveling on the light string, okay, and this reaches the knot, or this is the knot. Okay, when this reaches the knot, some part of it will be reflected and some part of it will be transmitted to the heavier string. Okay, so this is what happens. So some part will be transmitted along the heavier string and some part will be reflected back. Similarly, I can have a case in which I have a pulse in the heavier string and there is a knot here. What happens here? There is a reflected pulse again and there is a transmitted pulse again. But note some key points from this thing. Uh, the reflected pulse has a smaller amplitude than the incident pulse. Okay, since part of this energy will be transferred to the pulse in the heavier string. Okay, so first of all, my amplitude of reflection is less than my amplitude of my incident one. They should be noted down. Now, the inversion in the reflected wave that I mentioned here, okay, it is similar to the behavior of the pulse meeting a rigid boundary. Okay, when it is totally reflected. So whenever a pulse is on a lighter wave and it hits a denser, or say a denser string, then we see that upon inversion or upon reflection there is an inversion of the pulse. So if it was coming in like this and it hits a denser one, it goes back like this. However, if you see that if a same pulse is coming in a heavier string and it encounters a light string in front of it, so a heavier string impulse is coming, it encounters this light string. So while going back, the reflected wave does not invert. Okay, it does not become like this. So this should be noted down. How do you calculate different things here? First of all, you should note that we talked about the velocities of these mechanical waves as v is equal to root t by m, where t was the tension, m was the mass per unit length, and it was related to the area into the density. This says if the object or the body is heavy, then the velocity of propagation of wave in it is less. If it is light, the velocity of the wave inside it is high. Okay. Given this, I'll just quickly mention the important points. First of all, the frequency does not change in any of the pulses, whether it is incident, reflected, or transmitted. Okay, it remains the same. Now, when you're going from a rarer to a denser medium, you can easily write your incident wave as AI into sine omega t minus k1x. Okay, your reflected ray can be written as let me write it as AR instead of AI, because in this case it is not pure. It does not purely take away all the energy. So it is equal to AR into sine of omega t plus k1x. Note here that when I'm going to from a rarer to a denser medium, there is an inversion in the reflected wave. Okay, although it's traveling to the left side, it will travel to the left side itself, but there is a negative sign involved in the amplitude. My transmitted wave will again be traveling in the same direction. So this is my incident, this is my reflected, this is my transmitted. So note the direction here is similar to the incident wave, there is a different amplitude. When I am going from a denser to a rarer medium, what do I see? I see that there is no inversion in the reflected wave. So I have my incident wave, I have my reflected wave, but there is no negative sign here, there is a positive sign here. And similarly I have my transmitted wave as well. So let's look at another question. A wire of length 2L is made by joining two wires A and B of same length but different radii R and 2R, but having the same material. Now it is vibrating at a frequency such that the joint of the two wires forms a node. So there is a node here, there is a node at this end, and there is a node at the center as well. If the number of antinodes in the wire A is P and that in B is Q, then the ratio of P by Q is given by what? So first of all, let me just say that the mass densities of the first wire be mu1 of A be mu1. For the second wire, let me call that as mu2. Now because the materials are same, so densities for both are same. So let me call the common density as rho. Okay, we have these three basic parameters. Now my mass density is given by what? Mass density can be written as rho into the area into the length divided by the length. Similarly, I can write mu2 as rho into pi into what is the area? It is 2r. So you get 4 pi r square into L by L. Okay, so I'll call this as mu, and this turns out to be 4 times mu. So mu1 is equal to mu and mu2 is equal to 4 times mu. With these things, you should first of all note that tension in both are the same, which is equal to T. Now if you just use the formula for velocity in a string or any wire, you have the velocity is given by root of T by mu. So my velocity, let's say for V1 I will call it as V, for V2 I'll call it as root of T by 4 mu. It's nothing but V by 2. So what you can see from here is the fundamental frequencies in both the wires, let's call them as F01. So the fundamental frequency in both the wires is equal to V1 by 2L, and for second wire is equal to V2 by 2L. What is V1? V1 is nothing but V. What is V2? It is V by 4L. So we have the fundamental frequencies in both the wires. Now frequency at which both resonate in LCM, the frequency at which these both will resonate, okay, that will be the LCM of both these frequencies. So my least common multiple is what? It is equal to V by 2L. Hence the number of loops in wires are 1 and 2 respectively. So the number of antinodes is 1:2. Okay, as you can see from the diagram, I'll make one string like this, another string like this. Okay, and what happens is there is a antinode like this here, and because of the fundamental frequency that we just talked about, there are two antinodes in the other wire.